The parks are gradually reopening, and as we observe this process, one thing that's becoming very, very clear is that park capacity is the leading means of helping to protect guests in the parks. Park capacity is number one. Limiting park capacity is the very first thing they're going to do in order to create more space for guests. Goes without saying. Now, the interesting part of this situation is that limiting capacity creates more demand. And so in order to do that, obviously, they're going to have to start taking reservations for those spots that are open at 25% or whatever, as we've seen already in Shanghai. As such, there are going to be side effects on this process, on limiting capacity and taking reservations. And that's something that I asked you guys about in our last episode. And I asked the question, would being forced to make a reservation in order to go to Disneyland affect your desire to go to Disneyland? Would it inhibit you from going to Disneyland, especially for those who are coming from out of state? We got some answers. Kelly Lowe says that she lives in Texas and has a flex pass, and making a reservation is no problem. She just wants the parks to open. And that's actually very common. Making a reservation for most fans is something that they're willing to do in order to go to the park. Many Adventures says that he's coming from Canada, though, and he wants to plan. Now, international travel is a whole different conversation, even though Canada, we share a border. But let's just imagine, for example, that instead of Canada, he said Montana. Okay, so coming from Montana does require a lot more planning than, say, Arizona or Nevada. Meanwhile, we got DB, who says that he plans his trip a year in advance and would be terrified to try to plan a trip without some kind of guarantee. There's just too much financial investment, and that's very important. We're going to get to that. There's a lot of things we're going to get to as I open this up. But that's one of the things that I was getting at when I asked this question, is that it's not so much just, can I get into Disneyland? It's, as locals here at Disneyland, we are spoiled that we live so nearby. But for people who are coming from the other side, throughout the country, there's a lot more planning, airlines, hotels, all kinds of stuff, and and all that costs a lot of money, and you don't want to be putting all that money out without some kind of plan, some kind of guarantee that you're going to be able to get in the park. Christina Neal says that as a pass holder, the idea of making a reservation is unsettling. She just goes whenever she wants. And yeah, me too. That's one of the reasons why I have an annual pass, is so that I can go whenever I want. Whenever I want. That means if I could just decide right now, if I'm done filming this, I'm going to get in the car and drive to Disneyland. As a pass holder, that's the reason why we have one, is so that we can do that. So now we're making reservations, which limits the value, the allure of having an annual pass. And I may get into that later, although it's kind of like an offshoot of this conversation, but we may touch on that again. Jared Johnson says he lives in Arizona, no problem making a reservation, but he does observe that he also lives just 5 hours away. That's something I touched on earlier. It's one thing to say that it's no problem, I'll do it if you're, even just a few hours drive. It's another thing if you're living in, Louisiana. Okay, that's just a whole nother conversation. Christiana Cunningham also doesn't mind making a reservation, but observes that it's not the reservation itself, it's the competition. And there was a lot of that I was getting, and I think maybe some people missed the point of the question I'm asking. It isn't the reservation so much that I'm wondering about. I'm wondering about the competition. They're going to sell out? Okay, if they, even at 50 or 70 or 100%, if Disney went to a reservation system at varying degrees, they would sell out, because just doing that, first of all, creates a sort of urgency. Having reservations, it creates an urgency, and everybody wants to get in there, and they want to make that reservation. That just brought up another thought that I didn't actually put in my notes, in my outline here. But okay, so we do go to. We're going to get sidetracked here for a second, but I want to get this thought out while I'm thinking of it. You do reservations, right? Is there a limit to the number of reservations you can have? Because immediately the scenario that I could think of, and this is something that they were prepared for with Galaxy's Edge, is people trying to book all the days, right? You go in, okay, so today, let's say they start taking reservations for June 1st on May 1st, or June 1st for July 1st, let's say. I get online, I make a reservation for June 1st, for July 1st, then I get online, I can June 2nd and make a reservation for July 2nd, and then June 3rd for July 3rd, on and on and on. Is there a limit for an annual pass holder for me to do that? Can somebody squat on those dates? The Flex Pass prohibits that by saying if you don't show, you get like a strike. And after 3 strikes, then they block your pass or something like that. I can't remember, and because I would have done more homework on this if I had had that thought originally. But is that something that they're prepared to do? Are they prepared to limit the number of days that you can go? Which, by the way, goes back to the conversation that we were having about annual passes. And why the heck do I have an annual pass if I can't go? If you're telling me I'm not allowed to go. If I have a signature pass, which lets me go every single day, I should be able to go every single day. Hopefully we can get back into that as we talk about this further. Also, Christiana, before I leave her comments, she has a Flex Pass, which by default requires a reservation already. So, and that's a common theme. The folks that are, especially the annual pass holders who said that they are most willing or ready to make a reservation are Flex Pass holders, not signature holders like myself. I think that was, Christina. Christina, that's what she was getting at, is that is probably a signature pass holder. I don't like the idea of having to make a reservation. And then finally, John Lee said he would not make a reservation 30 days in advance. He lives in Kansas, which is a multi-day drive or plane ride away, and he needs to plan well in advance. And plus, he wants to stay for a few days. He wants to stay for 5 days. That in and of itself, the 5-day stay, is a huge problem already that I can imagine for this. And we'll get into that when we talk about what happens at Shanghai, because that is our only example. Shanghai is our only example so far as, what kind of method they have in place for booking those reservations. And I went onto the Shanghai Design website and I tested it. And what I observed first is that it is 30 days only in advance. You can't book 60 or 90 or 120. The calendar only goes for 30 days. It also only lets you choose one day. You can't choose multiple days. So my guess is that you go into the app, book your date, pay for that date because you got to put in a credit card, and then you have to go back in and do it again for whatever other day you have. And again, this goes towards that question that I was having. Is there some sort of limit? I couldn't test it, and I didn't see any verbiage to say one way or the other, but obviously I can't test it because you got to book it. So let's say you're John in Kansas and you want to book a 5-day visit to Disneyland, and you go into each. You can see, I guess the calendar tells you if they're available. It'll tell you there's gray if it's not available and then blue if it is. So you can see that the dates are there. Now, if there is a lot of demand, if it's super competitive, what are the risks for John to go in and book Monday? He saves all that with his number of guests, 5 guests, his whole family, 5 guests for $100 a day. And then he goes back in and he gets Tuesday. He gets the next day. And then he goes back in again. But now all of a sudden, this process has taken 10 minutes and Wednesday's sold out. What does John do now? What does John do? Does John just cancel the whole thing? I don't know. Now, besides that conversation, besides the risk or whatever of not getting all 5-year days if you want, or having to settle for a 2-day trip, then you've got the issue for John for making an airline reservation. He's going to fly. I think it's common wisdom or common understanding that the closer you get to a date to fly, the more expensive it is, right? Especially if it's going to a place, a travel location such as Disneyland or in the Anaheim area, or let's say if you're going to Disney World, Florida, hotels in Florida, especially on-site hotels. The further out you book, the more likely you are to get a better deal on an airline reservation, I think. I don't do a lot of flying, So maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But that I've booked a few flights to Vegas. That's something that I noticed. So if he's trying to book 30 days in advance, part of the process of planning a trip to go to Disneyland or Disney World is finding the right time to book your airline reservations. And now he's got to wait to make sure he's got his days, his whatever number of days he wants, before he makes his airline reservation, because you can't book an airline and then cancel it, right? Those things are non-refundable. I think you have to pay a huge fee if they do. I'm just kind of winging it here, but these are thoughts that are just kind of very curious about this. These are all the little pitfalls that I'm thinking about. All right, so you can't plan a trip. This gets to what I was saying before, or originally with my thought on this, is that the more that we get into this, the more we dive and dig into the perils of planning a trip to Disneyland, the more I feel like it's going to narrow the field of guests that can book a reservation no more than 30 days in advance. And it starts to become more of a locals park in both coasts, both California and Florida, which, by the way, begs another question that I have. California, reservations, becoming a locals park, no big deal. I think that I can probably, put out a roll call and find 25,000 people ready to go to Disneyland right now in Southern California. Right now. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't seem like any trouble at all for me. But can the same be said for Walt Disney World? Is Walt Disney World the kind of park that can sustain itself on local or near local traffic? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying just Florida. I'm not saying Orlando. I'm saying you could probably add the whole or most of the Eastern Seaboard. Most of those states are within a day's drive, I think, of Florida. So I would count those guys, Georgia and, Massachusetts, or whatever. I mean, New York. Those guys can probably make the trip on a 30-day notice because it's just a drive. But are there enough? I suppose there are. But I would have to listen. I think I read somewhere some financial analyst was wondering if Disney World could support itself on local only business, because Florida's going to have the same issue. If I wanted to go to Florida from California, I'm not going. I'm just not. If I had the means and the desire, let's just say. But as a Californian or anybody near there, it's definitely would inhibit me from wanting to make all those plans just in 30 days. Now, I teased this before. Let's talk about annual pass holders, because that's obviously a topic near and dear to my heart. Being a signature pass holder with the ability to go to Disneyland any day I want, anytime I want, without having to worry about it. The only thing I have to worry is if they ever reached 80,000 capacity and I got there in the middle of the afternoon and they closed the gates to everybody. I've never had that actually happen to me personally, but I have seen it happen. But that would be the only limitation. As an annual pass holder, what is the actual point of having a signature pass if we're going to be meeting capacity, be that the 20,000 number? It would be so easy for them to hit that number in minutes. So I go on as a signature pass holder and I try to get one and I can't. First of all, that doesn't seem right. First world problems, I know, but it is the thing. It doesn't seem right. But now, so what is Disney's plan to address that? Are they? I know that they have the exception. There's a clause, I think, in the contract that says that attendance at a Disney park with an annual pass is limited, both in terms of blockout dates, but also to capacity. If they reach capacity, you can't come in. It says that on the contract. So if capacity is 20,000 and they meet 20,000, I'm not entitled to get in, even though I have a signature pass, because of that's what my contract says. Agreed. That's really bad business in terms of the look. That's a bad optic. Again, why am I buying a signature pass if I can't go? I understand there are exceptions, the 80,000 thing, but that's such a rare occurrence that it doesn't even register as something that I need to be worried about under normal conditions. But now you're telling me I don't even know what the odds are. What are the odds of me not getting a ticket for the day I want? What are the odds of that? How many? Dude, there's probably 20,000 signature pass holders, right? And that is why I've said in other conversations that the Flex Pass is now, I think I said this in the live stream, a Flex Pass is now the pass to have because it's much cheaper than a signature pass. And you have there is the potential to be able to go every day. The Flex Pass, except for the 2 weeks in Christmas, the Flex Pass gives you the potential to go to Design every day, but you have to make a reservation. And I think it is something like 30 days in advance. So we're already doing that, which is what I suggested before. And so maybe I get one, maybe I don't, and I'm paying less for that risk that I don't get in, which is more comfortable for me. But I still have that potential that maybe they don't sell out. Maybe it is still wide open and I can go every day, just have to make a reservation. But a signature pass holder, I tell you what, we are definitely getting the short end of the stick on that. Now, I'm not here to complain about that. This is just an observation. That's not the point of what I'm trying to say. I'm not here with my pitchfork in a getting ready to riot. I'm just saying that's something that needs to be talked about. All right, now finally to wrap this conversation up, as we were writing this and recording it, news was breaking earlier today that Universal has, they've submitted their plan to open June 1st. Obviously they're going to get approved because Florida needs Universal's business and they're going to acquiesce to whatever, unless it's just some kind of ridiculous strategy. But I don't think that's the case. I'm sure they've got a very sound strategy in place. Universal has committed to a June 1st opening. Meanwhile, Disney also just today confirmed that June 16th? Reservations have been canceled up to June 16th, if I'm understanding correctly. And also the dates on the calendar have been removed have been marked as closed. So they've already taken those dates off the calendar on the Disneyland website and on the app. So we know that Disneyland is at least, or Disney World is at least 2 weeks behind Universal if everything plays out. How does that jive with you? Are you cool with Universal opening up that early? Does it seem early? Are you cool with Disney waiting in the weeds a little bit to see what happens at Universal? Or would you prefer Disney do the same thing and open Disneyland up on June 1st or whatever date that winds? Oh, I think it was June 5th, actually. June 1st was the date they gave for cast members, like a soft opening, and then they were going to open wide on June 5th with normal restrictions. Food for thought. Now, I'm going to leave you with this, Fresh Baked. For our next video, we're in this situation. We're watching Disney, face this challenge, and it's a really tough spot. It's a really tough spot for management to say to pull that trigger and say, okay, we're ready to open, and we're going to do all these things for customer safety and all that stuff. But somebody has got to make that decision, and I don't envy Disney executives in this time. But I was watching Katie and Spencer's live stream the other night this week, and somebody asked a question that I thought was a really, really good question, very thought-provoking question. What would Walt do? What would Walt do today in response to this pandemic? It's a fascinating thing because we all hold him in very high regard, and we imagine that he has a lot of wisdom, and he's shown a lot of wisdom, and that he would probably do the right thing. So let's play that game. I'm going to try to paint a couple different scenarios in our next video. Not saying that they're right or wrong, but just some possibilities on what Walt might do. So leave us a comment below and tell us what you think Walt would do to respond to this situation. And until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. We sure do appreciate you watching these videos with us as we get through these times. And remember that we love you very much. And happy that you're joining us. Don't forget to like the video and tell your friends about our show. Tell your friends about Fresh Baked. Subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification button. And remember that we love you very, very much. And please be kind to one another. And we'll see you next time. Fresh Baked.